Hello and welcome to another weekly update. In the run-up before Christmas, this is the last weekly update before Christmas, and hopefully you are ready and prepared. You won't know this, but this is the second or third, depending on how you're counting, time I've attempted to record this, due to interruptions from the postal people, from the supermarket delivery people, from visiting people, so it's a busy time of year, and it's one of those annoying things. With a 10-minute long video, it's actually easier just to start again than it is to try and do the editing and cut and splice and all that sort of stuff. So apologies if I sound like I'm repeating myself. Hopefully it won't be too obvious. Alright, so there are still things happening this week. So earlier in the week I put out a blog post continuing on from the last two blog posts I did about the Microsoft Healthcare bot. So previously I kind of introduced it, talked about its features, and then the second blog post talked about installing it and getting it running in your tenant. And this one's really talking about configuring it and making it work within your organization. And the biggest takeaway for me actually with going through this is how configurable it is, how many things you can change to make it run in your organization well, and really how fully featured it is as it's not a product, as a service, as a thing that Microsoft have given out to people to use, and they're not really making a huge amount of noise about it at this point. Kind of feels like I'm the only person talking about it, and it's kind of gone out there quietly into the world. But it's a thing you can use and get on Azure and run, and it's got a number of interesting workloads. A lot of the things I'm doing in the screenshots and the blog posts are all about triage, because it's more interesting and then everyone knows what that is. But there's also some other scenarios as well that it comes kind of pre-built, such as finding a local provider. And you can also build your own. There's a fully featured workflow editor in there to build up your own workflows. There's a ton of ways you can change the kind of built-in messaging, the support for multiple regions and multiple languages. There's a lot of things you can do. It's GDPR compliant, it's HIPAA compliant. There's things you can do to really make it right for your organization. So if you are in healthcare, if you work in that space, this is definitely worth a look. And even if you're not, it's still interesting to see what is available. And the good thing about this blog post that went out this week about configuring it is there's lots and lots of screenshots around, so you can really just look through and see all the things that you can change and see how you can change how it operates, see how you can turn various things on and off to change how it operates. So have a look at that if you're interested. Like I say, plenty of screenshots in this blog post as well. Other things that are happening in this week's news. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, maybe the week before, I spoke about how Microsoft is moving over the rendering engine in Edge from Edge HTML over to Google's Chromium. Now, this week they've started opening a sign-up process for beta testers who want to beta test this new Chromium Edge. There's a sign-up page you can go to now. So that's kind of important if you're a developer in this space. If you make anything that is more complicated than just like a basic web app, so if you do anything with WebRTC, for instance, anything with media workloads, you will be interested in this. And actually as well, I'm going to sign up because one of the things I want to understand is whether the stuff that currently works in Edge with its current rendering engine that only works in Edge, so I'm specifically thinking about some of the ORTC stuff, the Skype Web SDK stuff, whether that will still work as it moves over into Chromium Edge. So those are the things I want to find out, as well as what's available and what the new things you can do. I want to understand what doesn't work anymore. So it's good that they've opened this up for beta testing. It's interesting that it's a bit more further forward maybe than I thought it was. I thought this was like, we'll do an announcement, we'll go into and do some development work, and then we'll come out of it, and then we'll have some beta testers. So the fact they're signing up beta testers now, I think that's kind of earlier than I thought it was going to be. So watch this space going into January, I think. Also happening, of interest to developers, I think, is Windows Sandbox. So this was officially announced this week, and think of it like a small cut down VM that users run, and they can sandbox applications. So if you've downloaded an application from the web and you think it's a bit dodgy, you can run it inside this sandbox, and it will kind of, it's a safe space for it to run. It hasn't got kind of access to kind of ruin your machine, and you can throw it all away again when you're done. The reason I think it's interesting for developers is that this actually makes a really handy place to test out code and test out applications, because you know, maybe and hopefully it can make that kind of it works on my machine stuff go away. If it works inside the sandbox, then the sandbox is kind of going to be the same regardless of the machine, wherever it is. So it's kind of like a nice abstraction. So I think we might see developers kind of testing and not optimizing, but just kind of confirming that everything works inside Sandbox as a good way of saying, well, you know, if it works in Sandbox here, it will work in Sandbox over there. So yeah, it could be interesting. So there's a good post on ZDNet by Mary Jo Foley about Sandbox, the kind of information we know today about it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that coming into 2019. It could apparently debut in the Windows 10 that is slated for the first half of next year. And finally, because it's Christmas time, because, you know, I guess lots of people will have holidays and will be wondering what to do with themselves, maybe if they've got fed up talking to their families. Great post by Scott Hanselman about DOSBox. So I hadn't heard of this. I missed, apparently he posted about it last year, 5 years ago apparently, sorry, and I didn't see it then. So it's good to see it now. Basically it's a DOS emulator. So it's a DOS emulator. What makes it interesting is that you can slow down the clock speed, because a lot of DOS games are tied to the clock speed, so you can't play them on today's PCs. They're just so stupidly fast. It just doesn't work. So this one you can, so it's an actual emulator, so you can actually slow down the clock speed, which is interesting. So you have a variable clock speed, which means you can kind of tweak it for the games, which is really interesting. And yeah, so there's a bunch of screenshots in Scott's post about how, yeah, it's very easy to set up. He's got some screenshots, and then you can go and run games. So if you don't have a bunch of games anymore from your DOS days, there is a website, gog.com, and it's got them all nicely packaged up that you can get them and just start running with them. So some good nostalgia there if you used to do DOS games, and if you didn't, then you missed out, and you should spend some time and geek out playing them because they're awesome. All right, I think that is everything I wanted to say this week, other than to wish you a fantastic Merry Christmas with your family or your friends or wherever it is you're celebrating this year. I will be back again in 7 days' time on the 29th or the 30th after Christmas. I will try not to look too hungover and full of food. But whatever it is you're doing this Christmas, have a wonderful Christmas time, and I will speak to you again next time.